me that. He gave me "You Made a Boo Boo" instead, which, well, that's history, right?
Well, who spent the money to get these backup singers and to do all that?
Actually,
yes, sir. I don't know. I've been playing blues for quite a while. I've been around the world a few times, but I don't understand. I just like to play the blues. It's not all the money that I want. I just like to play the blues. And I like for everybody to get together and all of us play the blues. Let's have a good time. Because blues is why it's at. I'm telling you, I love it. I can't help but play it. So when you wake up in the morning and ain't got no money and got no job, or no gig, whatever you call it, you ain't got nothing but the blues no way, baby. Or either your old lady go to gagging you and arguing with you, telling you want you to get up and do something. And go to the steel mill, and you know you're a musician.
It's a radio thing.
Man, that gives you the blues too. So sometimes you really don't know what to do. And when you get worried, all you can do is get grab the harmonica and try to play the blues a little bit, baby. Here's the blues.
Folks, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live, download our free app, and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. Without further ado, I want to bring in a cat who has been expanding music, vocabulary in music sonically for quite some time. He continues to do it in his blues breakers fashion, but he always realizes that the blues come from the streets, the street music of African people, and he has always sought them out in his career and has inspired younger cats like myself who were born well after his career started. John Mayall, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
I see. So I'm a cat now, am I?
You are a cat, brother man.
That's twice you've said cat in the introductory speech there.
Well, I mean,
anyway,
when you woodshed with 500 cats, after a while you start to call them the cats.
I think so.
Hey, John, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about a conceptual thing. For a long time, you actually did not use a trap set in your bands, and I wanted you to talk about not only why you did that, but how it opened space within the music that you play.
Well, you mean a set list?
A trap set, drum trap set.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, so you would have a band with a bass player, harmonica, a couple of guitars, and no drum set. Can you explain why not having
a drum kit?
Yeah, a trap set.
I'm not sure what you're talking about here. When we record, it's with the band that I have. So,
Hey, brother, I'm going back to when you first came over here and you're putting together a band with a quartet and there's no drums. And I want you to talk about the space within the music that it creates without having a drum set.
Oh, you're talking about 1970 now with the USA Union album and...
Yeah, but I mean, there were times in England you didn't use a trap set either, and I just want you to listen. Always today in our formulaic society that we're living in, you always have a trap set. You always have a drum set, but you didn't. And I just want you to talk about your philosophy of how not having a drum set can open space within the music.
Well, it was a very long time ago. At the time when I had the standard lineup of guitar, bass, and drums, along with my stuff. With Mick Taylor's days in 1968, 69. I mean, we're going back that far. So I just wanted a change of pace. And, people like Jimmy Giuffre and several other jazz artists had been experimenting with not using drums or using a different instrumentation. So that's what I did.
Jimmy
And,
Jufrey.
you know,
Jimmy,
it lasted. It didn't last very long, maybe a couple of years, but you know, it was an experiment, and people took to it.
can you talk about your view of experimentation and how maybe the first real chance you took in a musical setting? Because I mean, you've been a huge inspirational force for me, more when you came stateside, just because of the cats that you tracked down. And, you know, I mean, I've talked to a bunch of them, but I just wanted you to talk about experimentation, maybe one of the earliest times that you experimented with something and it really worked out.
Well, you know, I never kind of think of it in those terms. You know, I make music and choose the instruments that I'm going to make music with, and the musicians who I choose to play whatever instruments. So, you know, it's not really not very a complex thing. You know, if I have a band in mind, and I put it together, and you know, it's usually quite a long-lasting thing. I mean, the latest incarnation, of course, we're now a trio, and so, you know, that happened in the middle of this year when Rocky Athos decided, you know, he was going to, you know, work on his own, and so, you know, it's just Greg Arzab on bass guitar, Jay Davenport on drums, and myself on everything else. So it's working out very well right now.
Talking to John Mayall here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Can you talk about, did you use an upright bass in your...
No.
Never once?
No.
Never once?
No, it wouldn't fit.
So the first band you had an electric bass player in it?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It wouldn't fit.
Yeah, John McVie was the first bass player.
Right. So let me ask you, Dave Mason, when I talked to him a few months back, basically said that the British cats, like yourself, pretty much heard the blues, you know, basically played your version of it and then repackaged it and sold it back to the States. Can you talk about that? Do you believe that that's an accurate assessment? I mean, he was being a little...
Well, it's an accurate assessment of what happened in the 60s. You know, it really has very little to do with what, you know, I've been doing, because, you know, I started playing the blues, you know, 10, 15 years before that happened in 63. So, you know, they're two different aspects, really. I didn't have a band together that I played publicly, but, you know, I was a devotee of jazz and blues and American music in general. So, you know, I would put a band together in art college and things like that. So, you know, I've always been involved in music from the age of 10 or 11 years old.
Can you talk about the first sounds of jazz? Because I didn't even know Jimmy Jufrey didn't play with a drummer. He had a drummerless quintet?
Yeah, quartet.
A quartet. So tell me where were you just getting it through records, or was there a...
Yeah, you know, if you're a record collector, I think it applies to anybody who collects records. You know, you delve into the kind of music you like, and you build your collection accordingly.
Well, I understand that, but I'm saying, were you getting off on bebop? I mean, were Dizzy Gillespie? I want to.
Well, you're still talking way later. I'm talking about the 40s. You know,
you're in the 40s. You're in the 40s.
Yeah, that's when I started. You know, collecting records. 78 LPs weren't invented then, but you know, so.
So we're talking about the four brothers Woody Herman. Can we talk? I'm producing a documentary on Stan Getz. I'd love you to talk about that big band 40s era that Mayall was marinating in.
I don't know. It's a very big subject if you want to cover the history of jazz.
I mean, that's what my show's about, man. This isn't fluff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been waiting to talk to you for months, man.
I guess you have. You got all these questions lined up. They're a little bewildering and overwhelming because of the scope of the question.
Well, I mean, listen, do I really want to talk to John Mayall about Eric Clapton? I could give a shit about that, okay? So let's talk about the real deal.
You know, when I first started collecting records, it was, you know, as an offshoot of my father's jazz record collection. So, you know, I grew up listening to this kind of music all my life. So his collection was more big bands, and because he played a little guitar, you know, he had a lot of focus on people like Eddie Lang and Lonnie Johnson and people like that, the Mills Brothers. So that was my early introduction to music, and then I went from there. When I discovered Boogie Woogie, it was Albert Ammons, Pete Johnson, Cripple Clarence Loft, and all those guys, Jimmy Yancey. Those were my influences, and where I sparked off on my own. So we didn't have a piano, so I used to have to go to other people's houses and kind of torture them while I kind of worked out the rudiments of that, So, so it was a hard slog, and there weren't very many people interested in listening to it because it was a bit archaic, and like I say, I was self-taught. So it was just one of those things, that developed out of my own interest in music. I was playing for myself, really, until the 60s happened, and Alexis Corner and Cyril Davis made that kind of music palatable to a larger audience, and that kicked the whole thing off.
As to a layperson, a non-musician, and a journalist like myself, how did they stretch it to make it more palatable to a more pop or larger audience?
Well, it wasn't a pop audience. It was all the clubs in England were playing New Orleans trad jazz for 10 years. Humphrey Littleton, Chris Barber, and Kenny Ball, and people like that. That was what was the most popular kind of music. And then when that had a 10 years run, Alexis and Cyril Davis came out of that clique, and started putting the Blues Incorporated together. So that's how that all sparked off. And of course, it was a new generation, so they were attracted to this kind of music, and came from all different parts in the country, and that included myself coming from Manchester.
I'm talking to John Mayall here. I'm just wondering about the live setting. I mean, you were hearing this stuff on 78s. Maybe you had a stacker up top of your head like Ernie Watts did, going to sleep at night. Can you talk about a seminal? I mean, I didn't realize you were born in 1933. Is that accurate?
That's right, yes.
Okay, so you were born. You are. You've been a bit fearless, but I mean, can you talk about a seminal live experience of seeing some of this jazz in England, or if there was even a local big band that mirrored that really? It
was all, England's a very small country, so any band, London was the headquarters, really, with all the bands we used to travel in their vans up and down the country, so it was it was just easily spread, so it was mainly in the clubs, I would think, and there wasn't all that much activity in radio, but it was definitely a very thriving club industry all over the country, from top to bottom. So, it grew out of that, I suppose.
Can you talk about some cats that you saw live that really sort of blew you away?
Well, I caught all the Jazz at the Philharmonic concerts that came over. So, I was exposed to, meeting Art Blakey and countless jazz, Junior Mance, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, all those guys. I met all those guys when they came over to England to do their tours.
This is now we're getting somewhere with John Mayall because, Art Blakey's job, I was born in 1978. Blakey's job was to wash away the dust of everyday life when he would play for cats. And can you just talk, John, very, very candidly, because we live in an academic musical environment today. I don't know what it's like overseas, but you're in LA right now. I don't believe
that's where I live. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really believe that the vocabulary within any genre of music can grow within the four walls of academia. And I wanted to talk to you because when you're putting cats, like I've interviewed Larry Taylor twice, I've interviewed Ernie Watts, I've interviewed Charlie Owens. Rest in peace. I never got to Blue Mitchell. But you know what? When I see your bands, to me, it's a bunch of street scholars. It's cats that never learned, throw away the books, never had books. There were no jazz curriculums. It was an oral tradition, and you burned on the bandstand. You tell me about our talk about that.
Well, that's the way it always has been. You know,
not in today's. Maybe in your band, but there's a stagnation amongst all musics, and it has a lot to do with the fact that cats are now, if you can afford it, you pay $30,000 to go to school so you can learn some sort of theory or you can learn improvisation. John Mayall didn't learn improvisation in the four walls of a classroom.
No. I never learned to read or write music anyway, so so whatever. I just muscle along with what limited techniques I have. You know, I use it to the best of my ability.
But can you talk about the idea of seeing Art Blakey play live on the? I mean, just as for younger generations and cats like that, what was it that stood out to you?
Well, you know, I'd collected their records for years. You know, when you get an opportunity to see them live, and it's just a great experience. You know, so you know, people like Horace Silver and Wes Montgomery. I don't know, the list is pretty endless. They all came over to London and did their club tours, and all over Europe. You know, so.
You still there?
Yeah.
Okay. No, well, I guess what I'm getting at is that even I talked to Larry Taylor, the great bass player, and that track we let in on, we're going to get to in a minute because you don't realize this, but it's been my theme song for quite some time. I think on Crusade Records, which was a label that you started, I believe. But the jazz was right alongside the blues in the 1950s. And
it always has been. You know, you can't separate the blues from jazz because jazz grew out of the blues and work songs and things like that. It's an African American form of music. You know, so it all came out of one source.
How do you know it was an African source?
Well, you just read any history book of jazz, you know, spirituals and work songs, prison songs. You know, it all starts somewhere. Then recorded music came in, so nobody really knows what the scene or what kind of music was before recorded music. But it's a long tradition. You know, it goes back a couple of centuries.
When you would see cats like Junior Mance, Blakey, Horace Silver, it seemed. I mean, this was part of the Norman Granz contingent, Jazz at the Philharmonic. I didn't know Blakey was part of that group.
Well, that was some shows were dealt with by Norman Granz, but you know, promoters in England they would get American jazz stars and do them independently. You know, so there was plenty going on.
Can you, John? Can you talk a little bit about the first band you were in, where you felt like your ears really grew the most?
You know, I've every band that I've put together, I've enjoyed playing, and I've learned something from it. You know, so.
No, but I asked you the first time that your ears grew the most, when someone stretched you out and you started to hear things in the music in a specific time in your career.
Well, I don't know. I've always, you know, I've never worked in another person's band, so I don't really know how to answer that. You know, I've just progressed in my own way to play the music that I feel.
Can you talk about how you met Blue Mitchell?
Well, I wanted to put a jazz blues fusion thing together, and living in England, you could perhaps find a trumpet player who played like Blue Mitchell, you know, to have in your band. But of course, coming to America then and moving here, then you had access to the real thing. So you didn't have to find somebody who sounded like someone. You could just give them a call and see if they were interested. So that's how Blue came into the picture. So, you know, same with Red Holloway and Freddie Robinson, and Victor Gaskin, and you know, just I could get their phone numbers and ask them if they wanted the gig. So that's how it all came about, and that's how it always is.
Well, I mean, don't be so modest, man. I mean, there was no more of a burning band. I mean, you're putting together Keith Hartley with a horn section. I guess, can you just talk? I mean, we just talked about jazz came out of the blues, but then you're talking about coming to the States and saying, I want to do a jazz blues fusion, which was actually one of your albums along with Moving.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Can you expand on that for this worldwide audience? Because you just said that jazz came out of it. So when you're talking about jazz blues, I just want you to riff on that.
Well, it's just a free form. My band's just a free form thing. There were very little charts or anything like that because we didn't need them. So it was a great blowing experience. So we had a lot of fun.
That's all you're going to give me?
Well, I don't know what else to say. I put a band together so that we can explore each other's music and enjoy ourselves and make the audience a part of that. So that's what I've always done.
Right,
So,
but you took cats that were prolific studio musicians. I mean, Blue Mitchell, Ernie Watts, those guys could read flypaper. So can you put me inside those sessions? I mean, this is, to me, is incredibly there's nothing going on like this in today's world, John. Nothing.
well, it's up to band leader to choose a musician he wants to work with. So, like you say, there aren't many people who do that, So, I guess I might be the only one. I'm not sure.
Sure. Why ultimately did you decide to come to the United States? And can you talk about your experience coming over here as an immigrant and who really took care of you? Obviously, we're having very different issues today as it relates to immigration in this country. Europe is having its own problems. But I'd just like you to talk about who took you under your wing when you first moved to the States.
I can't really remember. I came over in the beginning of '68 to do our first American tour, such as it was. It was 2 weeks in New York at the Cafe A Go-Go, one night in Detroit, and a week at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles, and a couple of weekends in the Fillmore in San Francisco. So that was my first introduction to the States, and I could tell instantly that it was a way of life that was more suited to what I wanted out of life. So, having been brought up on American movies, American music, American culture, I just recognized that it was the place for home for me. So within the year, I moved out here, and I've been here ever since.
Were you surprised at the lack of appreciation for African American music in the States?
No, not really, because you got the color bar here, and you had separate societies. Black and white did not mix. So it's part of America's heritage that fortunately it's changed now. So we're not living in those dark days of the last century and the early part of last century, the 20th century.
Well, are we talking about when you came over here?
We're talking about Black America was different from white America. They were two separate societies, so they didn't mix. So that when the American jazz and blues people came over to do a tour from 1920s onwards, they were totally revered. They were treated like gods over in Europe because they'd followed their music through records, and the color bar didn't exist. So they found a very warm welcome, and that's helped to spread the opportunity for us to hear these people who were legends to us to interact with them and see them live. So that was a great thing.
But there's no way that you knew that these guys weren't treated like heroes when you were still living. I guess all I'm saying is Brian Auger came over here, and he was going to do a gig with Herbie Hancock, and he went in because one night in New York, McCoy Tyner was playing, and he walked in and there were about 15 people there, and he was shocked because McCoy was a hero. So, and I look at on the back of those albums, I'm talking about when you came here came to live here in the late 60s. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, Whiskey A Go-Go wasn't a black bar. It was mixed. So I mean, it wasn't just two separate societies at that time. Am I right? Right or wrong?
No, I'm talking about earlier than that.
Exactly.
I'm
When are
talking
you
about
talking? So when are you talking about?
the 20s and 30s and 40s and the 50s, you know, so that's when, you know, black musicians would travel around in their bus, and there were cities where they couldn't stay the night because the hotels would bar them from, you know, from take catering to black people. You know, it's all part of America's history, and it's not a very nice one, but it's the facts, you know. And they didn't have that when they came over to play in Europe. So, you know, I don't know what else to tell you about that.
No,
it's common knowledge.
Well, it may be common knowledge to you, man, but for, you know, my show is based on, you know, it's about the lineage of music, and whether you know it or not, there's a huge dumbing down going on and within the world. So I think it's important. You live through it. So, I mean, the idea here is that whether it's Albert King or it's Bobby Blue Bland or it's B.B. King, what you're saying is in the late 40s and early 50s when John Mayall was going to the clubs, there was no segregation for black musicians.
No, segregation and the colour situation was totally unknown my whole life in England, and the same through Europe. There's no distinction. People are people, and, you know, they're taken at face value regardless what color they were. It's only in America that has the, you know, the racial prejudice history. So, you know, so that's the difference.
And I guess that was what I was talking about, is putting together a mixed race band. Ernie Watts.
Well, no problem in Europe.
No. When you came here and put together jazz blues fusion, I would like you to talk about the reception, that maybe the hardship that you might have been pushing up against, because that was still
no hardship whatsoever. No, that was the early 70s, you know. So things had changed radically by then.
Can you point to was there a turning point in your mind? Because you probably had. When was your first tour in the United States?
January '68.
And can you put a finger on? Do you believe that the appreciation of cats like yourself and the quote unquote British invasion helped sort of mend some of that segregation that was going on? Because you said it was totally.
Well, it drew young white people's attention to the fact that in on their own doorstep they had the originators of this music. So they were the source that had inspired all the British and European groups that came over to do their rock and roll blues shows. You know, so the Stones and Clapton, Blind Faith, Jimi Hendrix, in reverse order, but the Animals, you know, all of those British groups came over to America and playing American music. So it turned on a lot of people to what they had on their own doorstep.
Maybe not even maybe the fact also that they not only played American music, but they played with the legendary characters, right? I mean, they played with Jimmy Witherspoon, and they played with the
yeah.
So you actually could see like a camaraderie there that would not necessarily exist amongst the American, the white American.
Yeah,
and the black.
I don't know. It's such a massive subject, and you know, I really can't pinpoint. You could talk for days on that if you had a mind to. But you know, it's such a vast subject.
How can I ask you about you seemed that you were engrossed with American culture over there. You're not unlike John McLaughlin and cats that I've interviewed like Mason and Brian Auger and you know, I'm just curious about if you could talk a little bit about the vibe following World War II, where you were, if there were, which kind of beat poets you were getting off on, and who were the inspirations for you from a poet or writer point of view? Because from what I can gather, there wasn't much of that going. In fact, if you were blue collar in England, you could not write. You could only write if you were from royalty. So I was just curious about who are you getting off on from.
I have no idea what you mean by any of that. I'm stumped.
Well, okay, so
it wasn't my experience. I've grown up in a society where culture was taken on its own terms, whatever it was. So there's people who like jazz. Some people like. I've never been into poetry myself, so that's totally outside of my sphere. But music and movies, that's been my interest.
Oh, right on. No, that's cool. What I'd like you to talk about a little bit, and you can even put this into your own contemporary bands. Can you just talk to people about what you consider to be the most important qualities of leadership and why on the bandstand?
I don't know. I think you have to be it's going to be, you get to be born to that, I think, to be a band leader. A lot of people are great musicians, but they couldn't lead a band. So I don't know. But the people who are, band leaders may not be known so much for their musicianship, perhaps. But, for me, it's always been a natural that I would pick musicians who would reflect what I was trying to say through music.
Can you give an example of putting together a band and how you...
Well, any band that I've ever had, that's exactly what it is, So if I have a certain sound in my head and I like a certain musician and like the way he plays and would be interested in playing, I'll make him an offer. And if he's interested, then he joins the band.
But once you're on the bandstand, Miles used to turn his back on the audience in some ways. For a long time, Coltrane would come up to him and say, "What do you want me to play?" And Miles would just turn his back on him, and eventually Train would figure out actually he wanted me to be myself. And I think that we live in a very verbose time. You admit you're not a big reader, and we live in a time where people hang on words. And I just like you to talk about nonverbal communication on the bandstand and how that...
Well, for me, it's the total opposite of Miles Davis, I like to make the audience a part of it. That's your first and foremost job, to make them feel a part of what you're doing. So... every show I do is a different set list every night, and going to make sure you're communicating with the audience, make sure they're having a good time, and out of that you play your heart out and create music.
Right. So how is that different from Miles Davis?
Well, you've just told me Miles Davis wasn't interested in talking to the audience or facing them or whatever. The opposite of what I do. I make the audience feel a part of it.
Right. Well, no, that's the entertainer component to it. I'm talking about how you give people that you bring into your band the creative freedom to express themselves.
I just can't explain it. If you choose someone, it's because you like the way he plays, and you create an environment where he can stretch out and explore his own potential. That's it in a nutshell, no matter what the instrument.
How did you meet Shaky Jake Harris?
I can't really remember.
Because your piano playing on that track that we let in with is hypnotic. I danced my younger daughter to that. Ron Selico, your boy Freddie Robinson. All I'm saying is that was a crusade. How did you come up with the concept of that label? And then, you got to give me something with Shaky Jake. The guy was a total scrap iron, fly by the seat of your pants dude. But Mayall's playing piano on that.
Yeah, I don't know. He wasn't getting a record deal at the time, as far as I can remember, and he was somebody I wanted to record on a label of my own, which didn't really work out very well. It only had two releases on the Crusade label, but it was an opportunity for me to record somebody else in the studio, and I gathered together musicians who I thought would be helpful towards it, and Larry Taylor came along on that one, and Freddie Robinson, and all these guys, Blue Mitchell. So there were people that I knew that I thought would enhance the artist's work.
Did you there's some great on the vinyl pictures, Blue Mitchell albums. He called you in to do stuff with him on harmonica.
Yeah.
Was
Well,
that,
we were friends, so we were friends and had a working relationship, and we have fun.
was it a trip for you to? Did you get a chance to see Blue in overseas before you actually called him up to be in your band?
Yeah, I'd seen him with Horace Silver, in the Horace Silver days.
Can you talk about what Horace and those guys were doing, especially with the blues?
Well, Horace Silver was always, very well rooted in the blues, so, he was always one of my great favorites.
Right. Let me just ask you before I let you go here. Can you talk about a specific time in your career where you were fighting it? Could be on the bandstand or just in your life. How you overcame the adversity, how it made you stronger.
Quite frankly, I've never had any adversity. I've always gone my own way, and people have accepted what I do and enjoyed it. And I certainly enjoyed every facet of my whole career. No, I've never had any hard times.
So you're not human?
Well,
that's ridiculous, man. I've talked to everyone from Bill Cosby.
You're talking about music. I'm talking about acceptance.
I'm talking about over. I'm just saying, stretch it out. You talk about overcoming adversity. There are cats.
Well, everybody. I don't know how to answer. Everybody has their road to choose in life, and you do the best you can with your career or with whatever.
So where are you going now on what's the schedule for you for the rest of this year?
Well, we've just finished the whole of the East Coast and the South, so we've just done 32 shows in a row there, so that's all done. And then we've got 2 weeks off, and then we start in Seattle in a couple of weeks, and we work our way down the West Coast. So when we finish that, all the dates are on the website, johnmayall.com, so just check those out. And then we finish off in Hawaii, so that will be the last shows of the year as far as I know.
I always ask the cats this, too, because we're living through a pretty callous time. Can you talk to the audience about your concept of love?
Not really.
Why?
Well, love is a great thing, isn't it? So
yeah, it's not.
So if you're lucky enough to love someone or have people love you, it's a great feeling. So that's all that can be said about that.
Well, how do you give love to the world?
It's too general a thing. I make music. It obviously makes people happy.
Well, we just heard from John Mayall. I wanted to thank you so much for truncating this. And, if you ever have a chance to, you want to extrapolate on some of this stuff, that would be great. I really appreciate you taking the time. Yeah,
it's a little difficult when you try and talk about music in technical terms or whatever, but, a musician plays the way he feels, and that's what I've always been allowed to do. And fortunately, I've had that freedom to do it.
Do you still stay in touch with any of like Mark Almond or Keith Hartley? Do you stay in touch with any of those cats?
Well, they're all dead.
They're all dead?
Yeah, Keith's dead, and Johnny Almond's dead. Steve Thompson's dead. Blue Mitchell's dead. Red Holloway's dead. Freddie Robinson. They're all they've moved on.
What about Hextall? What about Hextall and Heisman?
Yeah, well, John Heisman's still working with Coliseum, I think, and Dick's dead. He died a couple of years ago. But just look at Wikipedia. It'll tell you everything about who's on the scene and who isn't. But
listen, I've interviewed 500 dudes from your generation. I'm not interested in looking up on Wikipedia. And in the future, man, if you want to come back and you feel like extrapolating, I just think that it's important for younger people to hear from people in the past who can connect the lineage of the music and the esoteric parts of it.
I know what you mean.
Well, I mean, it's vital. And,
Well, I've done the best I can. Put it that way.
well, listen, I mean, if that's the case, then I'm very proud. But I can just tell you, you know, you've had, like I said, your piano solo with Shaky Jake, and you know, Larry Taylor didn't even remember that. But I just think that you guys, it was an oral tradition. It was there was a street scholar mentality, you know, and I mean, I didn't even get into even asking you about the metaphysical or your experiences on psychedelics. So I would really love to.
No idea what that would be.
No LSD, no LSD for you ever?
No, of course not. No drugs at all. I never smoked a joint even.
Well, that says a lot, and that's a good thing. And that, because I like that, because they're, you know, the cats, like, it's important to be able to transcend on the bandstand, you know, without substances. So and Stan Getz, who I'm doing this documentary on, did you ever get to see Stan play, by the way?
Yeah, in concerts. I never met him personally, but you know, I heard him play live. Yeah.
What stood out to you about him?
Well, he's just one of those individuals that are telling all his own, and you know, it's an individual, so it doesn't sound. Nobody else sounds like him, and that's the mark of a great musician, when nobody can, when he's instantly recognizable.
Exactly. I was just
So there you are.
No, well, I was going to say that he was also on the road in ninth grade with Jack Teagarden. When were you actually first on the road, for the record?
61, 62.
And in which band?
Whatever band they put together. It was at first with Davy Graham on guitar, just the two of us, and then it went on to John McVie, Huey Flint, and Bernie Watson. It's all on our website.
Sure, but I just want to be clear. You've never been in a companyist before.
No, never.
No. Interesting. All right, my man. Listen, much love to you, John. Thank you for all your contributions, and
okay.
You know, keep burning.
Well, very good.
Keep burning, brother.
I certainly will.
Cheers.
All right.
Later
then.
on.
Bye.
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 Just heard from John Mayall, great multi-instrumentalist, still cranking, still doing the touring circuit, and asked him some pretty deep questions today, but he was only willing to partake so far. He did the best he could. We'll be back tomorrow with a couple of deep cats, Zane Kesey and Anders Osborne, and now we will rejoin the Jim Parisi Show.
I'm trying to think of what all that cost. You know, you have to understand, in those days.
Back then, that was $2,000, right? Instead of like
no,
$50.
No, it wasn't. First of all, we did it at the Celebrity Club in Providence. You probably never heard of this, did you? You missed the Celebrity Club.
No.